All right, welcome to our ARC 1510 figure ground assignment, where you'll be making a digital model and some cool drawings of your object. My object in this case was a blowtorch. Here, I'll give you a tour. You can see here I've modeled the solids. I've also modeled the voids. If I want to take a little quick X-ray vision tour of this thing, then I'm going to use a clipping plane to show you around a little bit. Doot, doot, doot. Just to provide a little bit of extra context here, just to show how this thing works. Maybe I'll flip this thing over and flip direction. Cool. Let's move through this. There we go. You can see my solid stuff is the gray. The red is the voids that I've also modeled here. And if I turn these different layers off, you might be able to see them even better. Take this guy here. Maybe I'll hide this. And you can kind of see I've modeled the void space as a area around this object. If I do something like go back to my layers and turn off the solids, then you can see how the void spaces inside have also been modeled. Now they fit really well because I made one from the other. We've seen lots of different techniques in our other tutorials for how to make one object from another object by extracting the curvature. So I won't go into too much depth here because we've already covered a lot of it. Okay, so let's get on to the business of doing this assignment. So the first part of this assignment is to make a sort of taxonomy of sections, which is basically a big index of different sections of drawings from different directions. Now, we've looked in the past at other ways of extracting drawings and sections from a model, and this is going to be a little bit of a twist on that. So the way that I'm going to do it is I want to actually make a bunch of planes that kind of cut through this object and really visualize that figure-ground relationship. And the way that I'm going to start is by selecting this object, and I'm going to write the command bounding box. Whoops, can't type right now. There we go, bounding box. And just say okay. And what this is going to do is it's going to draw a box that defines the whole airspace around my object. And the reason I like this is because when I make those planes that visualize cutting through this object, it's going to make them in a nice consistent way where I know I'm getting the whole geometry of the object. You don't necessarily have to do this, but I think it makes it really easy to make consistent sized planes. While I'm at it, I might as well go ahead and make a new layer for something like planes. Let's just start there. And maybe what I'll do is I'll go ahead and make that my active layer. I'll take this guy, I'll move him to that layer, and yeah, I'll start there. All right, cool. So why do I do this? I don't really need this bounding box, but what I do want to do is make some planes that fit the object really well. And because I know this bounding box is basically at the extent of the object, then what I can do is something like a Control-Shift, and maybe I'm just going to duplicate the border of that, and then maybe what I'll do is make a planar surface from that border. And now I've got a plane that fits my object really nicely. Maybe I'll do the same thing for the front. Duplicate border. And from the side, Control-Shift, duplicate border. Cool. All right, I don't even need this box anymore. Cool, because now what I've got is, I've got this border, planar surface, this border, planar surface. And now what I've got is I've got some planes that I can move through my object to create kind of cutting planes. So there we go. This thing is nicely defined by these planes that fit it in a really tidy way. That looks good. So let's go ahead and find a good view. I saved one already. And let's go ahead and start moving through here. Now, we know from looking at this object in previous assignments and from kind of giving a tour with the clipping plane, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening right in the middle of the object. So what I'm going to do here is decide to cut a section right through the middle. Now, I'm not using a normal section command because what I want to do is I'm going to create these cool figure ground drawings here. And what I'm going to do is intersect this plane with this object. Really what I'm going to do is I'm going to slice through the object a bunch of times with different planes in spots where something interesting is happening to create this figure ground drawing. So the first thing I'm going to do is maybe move this plane to the middle of the object because I know there's a lot going on there. So an easy way to do that, maybe I'll go ahead and change this view to, like a ghosted view. I'll just go ahead and, that's not super helpful right now. So maybe I'll do even just a wireframe. So let's go ahead and move that or even align it to the horizontal center of this thing. That's pretty handy. Cool. If I look at that in an axon, you can see now that's at the center of the object. That's nice. And maybe I'll do the same thing with, where is this going to be cool? Let's see here. Maybe I'll draw this. That's got a little bit of stuff going on there. Maybe I'll kind of copy this and paste this. And maybe I want these two guys to kind of intersect each other right in the middle of the axis of this pipe. So maybe I'll go back up to the top and I'll say align with the vertical center of, I can kind of see where that pipe is in my yeah, there we go. That looks right. So that's two pretty interesting sections right there. And maybe I'll do one more just kind of evenly spaced throughout there. So copy, paste, and move this from that corner to that corner. And now I've got some good even spacing around there. So then the next question is like, where do I want to cut my horizontal sections? Well, let's find some cool stuff. Let's go ahead and get this guy, and I'm going to move him. Let's look at this guy in the front view. I'm going to change my viewport, if I haven't already, from shaded, where I can't see anything useful, to let's go with ghosted here. You can also do wireframe. You can also use a section plane to find cool sections of your object. I am just going to take that plane and I'm going to move it wherever things get kind of interesting and change geometry a lot. So down here I've got the base with this kind of band on it where I know it's full of liquid. So say copy paste, that's okay. Let's create another one. Let's move it up here to where it gets empty. Copy paste. Let's move it here where it gets thicker again. Copy paste. And so I'm not evenly spacing these because evenly spacing doesn't get me all the cool stuff. So it's up to you to decide where the cool parts of your object are. Let's go ahead and align this with the horizontal center of this guy. Can I grab this? Yeah, there we go. That's a good spot right through the middle of there. Copy paste. Let's keep moving this thing up. And you don't always have to move it, vertically. Just like move it to places where it makes sense and things are changing in your object. Maybe I'll do one more up there and copy paste, and I'll do one more somewhere right up there. Cool. So now you can see I've got this collection of stuff. Let's go to my ghosted view. I've got this collection of all these different planes that are intersecting my object wherever things get interesting, right? Cool. So this is a drawing where I'm going to save this view I haven't already. So I'm going to pick a good view of this. Maybe it'll help for me to take a look at all of these planes and make sure that nothing is at such an angle where, things are kind of like, you don't want something like, like this, where you've got a really steep angle looking at it. You want a kind of a good angle looking at everything so you can get a kind of a decent view of all of these intersections. So you don't want to look at these too straight on in any direction, because then it just stops being an interesting drawing and you don't get a lot of good resolution there. So let's go back and let's save whatever view we think is interesting. I think something around here is pretty good. Now I've already saved one. If you don't remember how to save it, you can go to, when you get this view, you can go to your view, set view, named views, and create a new view that way. It's also how you can recall these old views, or you can use your named views tab up here if you have that added to your favorites bar or your little tab bar. So I'm going to grab my axon view right there. That looks pretty good to me. Cool. And now what I can do is I need to go through and make my my taxonomy of this object. Okay, so let's get started with the next part of the assignment, which is to make a sort of figure ground diagram from all of these cut planes. Now, you'll recall that a figure ground diagram is a sort of black and white or contrasting two-tone image that diagrams the positive and negative spaces, or the solid and the void spaces, or really two contrasting spaces of an object in a way that can make very clear this sort of opposite relationship. Okay, so let's get back here and get on with the business of making our taxonomy, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a grid or an index or some kind of arrangement of all of these section planes lined up next to each other, or in a way that I can easily compare one to the other. The other thing that I want to do in this assignment is to not only have the sections be easily comparable to each other, but for them to easily be linked back to the source object. So I can easily look at how one section compares to the arrangement of the cut plane in the original object. In this case, the blowtorch. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of all of these planes just as a backup. Now, I don't think I'm going to need it, but you never know. So maybe what I'll do here is quickly go to a new layer and I'll say backup uncut planes. And I'll go ahead and just take this guy and say select objects. That's going to select all the planes on that layer. I'm going to copy them, I'm going to paste them, and then I'm going to take all that stuff that I just pasted and I'm going to move it to the backup uncut planes layer. Then I'm going to turn it off so I don't have a bunch of stuff all in the same place. And I'll just kind of keep this. Maybe I'll just pop that up back up in the stack. Now let's get on with cutting our sections. And we've looked at a lot of different ways to cut sections, but all of the ways that we typically use do what you would normally expect from a section drawing, where you just extract a sort of the profile of the solid geometry, and then that's that. With this drawing, we're asking you to do something a little bit different. We want to clearly articulate both the relationships of the solids and the voids, and typically in section drawing, you're showing the solids and the voids are just kind of left as everything else that isn't solid, right? We want you to be a little bit more specific. So we're doing a sort of inverted section drawing here, which is a sort of figure ground drawing where we're going to ask you to kind of more clearly articulate the voids and the solid spaces, not just the solids. So we're going to do that by sort of subtracting out the solids from the void spaces in these planes. And we're going to represent the voids as dark and the solids as light. Right, let's go ahead and cut these sections. And of course, remember, these are special sections, and we've already looked at lots of different ways to produce section geometries. And we're going to use one more in this one. And this is actually kind of one of the simplest ways to do this particular assignment, but you have to have a really clean model to do it. Now, just to make sure I articulate some of this stuff a little bit more clearly, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to change the, let's move this guy back up here. All right, planes. Let's change the color of the planes so that they're different than the solids. Let's go with gold. Why not? It's Olympic season. Cool. So now I can clearly see that these guys are on different layers. Again, they're just, the colors just change to match the layer. There's no actual material assigned to this yet. So what I can do now is, if I want to create that sort of section drawing where I've got the void space remaining and the solids removed from it, then the easiest way I know of to make it is to simply take your planes. So I can do it all at once, or just to be a little bit safer, maybe I'll just go ahead and take one at a time and I'll say split this plane, and I want to split it with all the solid stuff, so I can easily just select all of the solids and say, yeah, just split it with whatever intersects that thing, right? You can see what I've got now is I've got a new plane and it's got this geometry has been split by the solids. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move this by some fixed amount and just kind of get it out of the way. Right now you can see right now this thing is kind of like, it could be a figure ground diagram, but not yet, because it's kind of just all figure, right? Or all ground, depending on which one's which. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to delete that, and now I've got my solid represented as something that's been removed, and the void is clearly articulated by the remaining material. I want to do this because if I did it the other way around, then I would just end up deleting a whole bunch of the void space, and I'd just be left with the one in the middle, and that's just less interesting. So I'm going to do that for basically every plane, where I can then take that thing and say split this, and I can split that with the solids, select object, say done, and I'm just going to move it over that same amount, and then I'm going to clean it up again. So this works great if you've got a nice tidy model and the splits all work properly like they're supposed to, right? So you can kind of see how, just kidding, see how these guys they have this stuff removed. That's working really nicely. Now, if it doesn't work really nicely, remember there's about 1,000,000 billion ways to extract geometry from an intersection of two objects. So let's look at another one. So if you start getting errors like split failed, or if you just, for whatever reason, want to do something that isn't a split, sorry, my computer fan is turning on, so it might get a little bit noisy right now. But if you are doing something where the split is failing, then let's look at another way to create a very similar geometry here. And let's do that with the command that we've seen before, which is intersect two sets. So intersect two sets, you right there. Thank you very much. So maybe the first objects to intersect, let's just go ahead and just do like one plane, just to, or yeah, there, just do one. There we go, just to kind of put a little bit of that finer point on it. Maybe let's do this one, because this one's really clearly easy to see, because it's got that knob going on. Okay, cool, so that's one set. And then the other set is, I don't want to have to click on all of the solids that are in there, because there's kind of a lot of stuff going on back there, and I don't want to worry about missing anything that might be deep down inside. So I'm just going to say the other set is just all the objects on the solid layer. And let's extract the intersections between those things and that one plane. And if I say enter, done, then what you'll notice is you get a nice tidy intersection right there. So maybe what I can do then is let's go ahead and move that over by like 10 inches. And then that gives me one thing that I'm looking for. The other thing that I needed was the boundary of the plane. So then I can go ahead and use my, click on this and say duplicate border, and I'll get the boundary of the plane too. Let's move that over. So that starts to look a lot like that stuff, except for we don't have a clear mix of solids and voids. So let's go ahead and say, let's make this a planar surface, and let's split that planar surface with split these curves wherever that thing gets cut through, right? And I might have to go back and look at my object here just to make sure that I'm doing this right. So that cuts through, and then this stuff all gets cut through too. So yeah, I'll split all that, and then that gives me the ability to then delete out that solid stuff like there. Surface, and what I might have to do also is delete these, delete some of these other curves out of there. You know, so like that curve can go, that surface can go. So this is going to take a little bit of extra cleanup, but if you've got a model that wasn't set up correctly from the very beginning, or has a little bit of random junk floating around in it, then this is a really great way to get around something like a failed split. Okay, so a quick note about why splits fail, because this is a really common challenge with making sections and cutting things in Rhino, or really with a computer in general. So if I look at the top view, let's talk about what a split is. Let's go ahead and just say, let's just make this, say copy paste, and then let's go ahead and make a let's make a good squiggly line here. So let's go ahead and just skew you and say do. That's fine, and let's do another one. Here's one, and let's do one more. Cool. Let's talk about splits. So let's turn all these into planes, right? Planar surface, done. Let's go to a shaded view, done. Let's go ahead and let's change the color of these guys here, just to move them to a different layer, just so it's easier to see this. Solids. Okay, cool. Let's make sure also that these are actually all touching. Yep, they're all good. Cool. Top view. Let's go. So when you're asking your computer to split something, you're asking it to create some number of objects from the original intersection of or some objects. So basically what it's saying is when you're asking your computer to split this with this, you're asking it to divide this into some other number of objects based on how this intersects that thing. And in this case, it's going to be fine. So if I say split this with this, it's going to say, cool, that's one piece, that's another piece, right? It can do that, no problem. It's also going to be perfectly happy to split this with this because it can clearly define this thing into one piece, one other piece, right? There you go, clearly defined. Two pieces, or some fixed number of subsets. So this thing, it's not going to like. So if I say split this with this, it's not going to work. You're going to see down there, split failed, objects may not intersect, or intersections may not split object. And in this case, they don't, because to split an object, you need to divide it into some other number of objects. And in this case, this object doesn't get divided. It just kind of is intersected by this. So this will not work. So if you have something where you're counting on cutting out, some sort of shape like this from a plane, then this thing here needs to either fully intersect it or you need to give it some kind of a thickness, right? So if it doesn't have a thickness, then it's just saying you're just kind of have some infinitely thin little thing that just makes a little flap here. And that's not a cross section, it's not a split. All right, so back to the assignment. So after a few minutes of clipping and splitting and trimming and cleaning some stuff up, I've got I've got all of the ingredients that I need for my taxonomy. So you can see with each of these planes, I've got, it's kind of hard to see when the ones are close together, but I've got all of the void space left and I've got the solids all removed. So what I'm going to do now is, first thing, do yourself a favor, and for stuff that belongs together, go ahead and group it. So the reason for this is because if you've got something like, a plane like this, if I grab this and I start to move it around, I'm going to lose some of that stuff that belongs oriented with that plane. So the easiest thing to do with this is to, I think, simply just group, which is just G enter, group, and just group everything so that when you drag it around, it all stays together. So now that I've got those all cleaned up, I can lay them all out nice and neat. So there's lots of ways to do that. We've looked at a bunch of them. My favorite way, which we've seen in the past, is to do something like go over here and let's go to the top plane. Look at that guy that I just dragged. That was part of this whole stack here, right? That's all that stuff. And so maybe what I'll say is distribute. You can also just drag them in one by one, but I'm going to distribute them along in the Y direction, which you see down there. Distribute Y. Let's see if I got enough room there. Top. Nope, I didn't. So let's go ahead and try that again. Move it over there. Same thing. Distribute Y. That's closer. Maybe I want to give them a little more breathing room than that, but that's fine for just a general demonstration of how to do this. Now remember, these things are all kind of floating all over the place. So then maybe what I'll do is I'll just go to the top view and I'll just project all this stuff. Project to C-plane. Delete the originals, or at least I can, because I don't need them anymore. All right, cool. So then that's how those get all lined up. This is much the same, except for maybe with these guys, what I need to do is to go to the top view. And maybe I'll kind of take you. This would probably look its best if I knew what the spacing was between these things. Maybe I can just figure that out. So let's go to dimension aligned. Let's see what this ended up being. 0.039. All right, cool. Then let's just go ahead and make all these 0.039 too. So we'll say distribute, and then spacing 0.39. Done along the y-axis. Cool. And then what I can do with these is I can also either project them to the control plane, or I can do that later by, maybe I'll rotate these first by 90, and then top, move these, project to control plane, yes. And then maybe I'll go ahead and line these up somewhere nice and neat by saying, let's group these together for now and do an align command. And let's say let's align to the left of that group there, and then align again for the bottom of that group to there. Or maybe I'll do it to the left to there, and let's move that. Was it 0.39? Is there a spacing there? Maybe I want to do more than that. Let's move it another inch just for now. And then let's go ahead and say align the top of that to there. Okay, cool. So then that's one collection. So you see these are all one type of section. These are all another type of section. And then with this guy down here, which is this one, that is yet another type. So maybe I'll just go ahead and spin it around. Maybe I'll do a negative 90 degrees there. And maybe I'll flip it and say negative 90 there. Project to the control plane. Yep. Align the bottom with there. Align the left with there. Move it. Oh, shoot, I can't remember what the number was, but I can align the left again with that. There we go. So then that is like the beginnings of a taxonomy right there. And now I'm looking at it probably, in my mind, this is actually on a landscape page, and this all gets rotated like 90 degrees, like maybe like that. Nope, just kidding. Like that. There we go. And then maybe I might have, so this is right now, looks like a pretty clear taxonomy to me. And it's ready to export to Illustrator, where I can then adjust my pochés and fills as necessary. Now, what you might want to do, sometimes depending on your settings, you could just export it like this. If I wanted to go ahead and make a line drawing of this, I could also do make 2D. If I wanted even more control over this, and say apply. And this has gone ahead and this has made a line drawing for me. And I could even edit it in here if I don't like to work in Illustrator, and then export that to Illustrator, or I can just select all this and now it's ready to export in Illustrator. And you can either add hatches and pochés and stuff here, or you can add it there. You can also hatch in Rhino. So I can just grab this and say hatch, and I can pick hatch to apply here as well. Either way. So let's say I do want to export to Illustrator though. All you need to do with that, grab all this stuff, file, export selected. Let's just dump it on the desktop for now. Don't do that. Put it somewhere organized. Remember, at the end of the year, you have to turn in all your documentation in an organized way anyway, so don't do this. But this is just a demo, so I'll just say demo today is the name of this file. And then let's make it an Illustrator file. Boink. Say okie dokes. Export. We're just going to preserve the model scale of this for now. Sometimes you might just want to get a snapshot of the current view if you're working with something really big and you have to make a small board, but this will be fine for what we need to do. So it's going to export at actual size. We may need to reduce it though. You can actually plan out your whole board in Illustrator. You could just draw a boundary of the board and then scale it here, or you can scale it there. So recall that a figure ground looks like this. So we're going to make ours look like that by filling in the voids in black and leaving the solids white. Okay, so here I am in Illustrator. Let's open that file we just made, which is, just kidding, let's go to open and say this one, that's the one. All right, now where is it? It is, right now my Illustrator workspace is a mess because I was just on 2 monitors and now it thinks I'm on one. It's just gonna throw everything on here. There it is. Okay, cool. So let's see, this we know is actual size from the export settings that we just saw in our Rhino window. Let's see what our artboard is over here. Let's go make it the size of the project, which I think was 24 by 36. Double check that, don't just go on the video. And let's see if this fits on here first of all. Let's go ahead and just move this stuff over there. Hey, I think it does. So I got pretty lucky, and this stuff fits pretty darn well. If you do need to scale it, you can just select it all, right click or double click, transform, and then scale. And you can scale it by, use a real number, don't just eyeball it here, because then you're gonna have to calculate what it was. So, like something useful, 80%, 50%, something that you can multiply by. All right, cool. That's the first order of business. Now let's make it pretty and get all this stuff out of the way here. There's our hand tool. There we go. So let's get on with the business of kind of pocheting this. So you can see this all comes in as like individual lines. Not great, but still not that hard to work with. So my preferred tool for this is the shape builder, though you can also use the live paint tool. There are tutorials for both that we'll post. I'm just going to use this with the shape tool. So I'm going to select that first and say shape builder, please. And that's all a shape. Let's make sure I didn't miss anything in there because this is just one big plane, and say, sure, yeah, that's cool. And then I can just change this to whatever aesthetic I want. So like maybe I want my poché to be black. No? All right. Get out of here. My computer is locked up. Oh, here it is. Sorry, I'm dumb. All right. No, I wanted this the other way around. No line, pochette black. You. Done. Cool. One down. Okay, now this is all, I want no line color there. So let's change the appearance. The easiest way, I think, to do this is to go into the appearance tab and just say, you know, I don't want a stroke. I just want fill. Because that's going to mess up my, I don't want any kind of clunky lines messing up my nice clean stuff that I exported from Rhino. So for this, I want to say no stroke, and for the fill to be black. And there we go. That's one down. So then I can go through kind of all of these and use either the shape builder or the live paint tool, and I can do that again. So again, with shape builder, let's make this a shape. Let's change the stroke to no stroke. Let's change the fill to black. Done. Don't forget to add all these little bits down here too. There we go. Cool. So then go through and just do the whole board until you get something beautiful. And there you go. Your taxonomy should look something like this. In my haste to make this tutorial, I deleted a bunch of stuff over there that I shouldn't have, but that is the general idea of what you're going for.